This is quiz 4, demo video. I'm starting step 2. In this step, the demonstration will quickly detail the process of sifting through each piece of data one by one to determine the current coordinate system, geographic coordinate system, projection, datum, and spheroid. As you learned in Lab 3, it is important that we know the details or metadata and spatial reference of our data prior to adding it to the map. We must fix any data that does not currently use our desired coordinate system and projection. For some of the following questions, the answer may be unknown, none, there is none because it is not spatial data, etc. These steps should be completed for every quiz and lab in GIS 311, 312, 414, and any projects you complete within the GIS Certificate program. The first question, click on the properties of your recently renamed data frame and the Coordinate System tab. What is the current coordinate system of your data frame? And it's shown here. Question 2. Which of the provided data is a table rather than a feature class or shapefile? It's easy to look at our raw data for quiz 4 and choose which one of these is not a shapefile. Use Washington counties to answer the questions below. Be sure to pause the video if necessary to complete those questions. What is the current coordinate system of Washington counties? Open up Washington counties by clicking the properties. Let's try to reopen Washington counties. Now you can see that I'm going to scroll down to properties. We have the current coordinate system, question 3. We have the geographic coordinate system, also listed up above because this is a GCS, geographic coordinate system. There is no projection. The datum is listed right here, and the spheroid is listed right here. And that concludes question 7. Be sure to pause the video if you need to make these notations before you proceed. Given that we plan to use the projected coordinate system, NAD 1983 UTM Zone 10N, will we be required to alter the spatial properties of this data? Yes or no? If yes, what must we do? Define and project, or simply project? If you remember the rule, this answer is easy to determine. Determine the answer and make a notation in your notes in preparation for the online quiz. Moving on to question number 9, step 2.6 currently. Use toxic waste to answer the questions below, pausing the video to complete the questions and the answers in your notes. The current coordinate system of toxic waste. I go to the properties of toxic waste, and the current coordinate system is listed here. The geographic coordinate system is found by scrolling down a little bit further and is listed here. Be sure to make these notations in your notes. The projection is listed right here. And moving down the list, question 12, the datum, and 13, the spheroid, are listed here. Given that we plan to use projected coordinate system NAD 1983 UTM Zone 10, and will we be required to alter the spatial properties of this data? The answer here is no, because it already has the correct projected coordinate system. Moving on to the next step. Urban Gardens X. I pull up the properties. Answer questions 15 through 19. The current coordinate system is listed here. The geographic coordinate system is listed here. The projection is listed here. The datum and spheroid are here and here. Make these notations so that you're prepared for the online quiz. Given that we plan to use projected coordinate system NAD 1983 UTM Zone 10N, will we be required to change or alter the spatial properties of this data? Yes or no? And if yes, what must we do? Define, define and project, or just project? Make this determination on your own and record your answer in preparation for the online quiz. Moving on to Urban Gardens Y. The current coordinate system is listed here. The geographic coordinate system is listed here. The projection is listed here. And the datum and the spheroid are listed there. Given that we plan to use projected coordinate system NAD 1983 UTM Zone 10N, will we be required to alter the spatial properties of this data? Yes or no? And if yes, what must we do? Define, define and project, or just project? Using the information that you've just recorded, answer this question now. Moving on to Urban Gardens Z. Current coordinate system. Geographic coordinate system. Projection. Datum and spheroid. Given that we plan to use projected coordinate system NAD 1983 UTM Zone 10N, will we be required to alter the spatial properties of this data? Yes or no? And if yes, what must we do? Define, define and project, or just project? Using the information you've just written down for Urban Garden Z, enter your answer for this question. Use block groups shapefile to answer the following questions. Pause the video if necessary to complete the questions. The current coordinate system of block groups. This is the current coordinate system. The geographic coordinate system. Projection. Datum and spheroid. Given that we plan to use projected coordinate system NAD 1983 UTM Zone 10N, will we be required to alter the spatial properties of this data? Yes or no? And if yes, what must we do? Define, define and project, or simply project? Answer the questions on your notes or however you are recording them. Moving on to neighborhoods shapefile. The current coordinate system of neighborhoods is listed here. the geographic coordinate system there, the projection, datum, and spheroid. Be sure to pause the video if necessary. Given that we plan to use projected coordinate system, NAD 1983 UTM Zone 10N, will we be required to alter the spatial properties of this data? Yes or no? And if yes, what must we do? Define, define and project, or just project? Answer this question in preparation for the online quiz. Moving on to Neighborhoods 2. The current coordinate system is listed there. The geographic coordinate system there. Projection of Neighborhoods 2. The datum of Neighborhoods 2 and spheroid of Neighborhoods 2. Given that we plan to use NAD 1983 UTM Zone 10N projection, will we be required to alter the spatial properties of this data? Yes or no? And if yes, should we define, define and project, or simply project? Record your answer now. Use Places WA to answer the questions below it. Current coordinate system of Places WA. Here's your answer. That should give you the answer to the rest of the questions. The geographic coordinate system, the projection, the datum, and spheroid. Given that we plan to use NAD 1983 UTM Zone 10N, will we be required to alter the spatial properties of this data? Yes or no? And if yes, what must we do? Define, define and project, or simply project? Record your answer in preparation for the online quiz. Remember, prior to any analysis or mapping, we must always determine, as we did in the previous many steps, does our data line up? We need to check the spatial properties of all of our data that we plan to use. In this step, I will demonstrate a new process or preliminary step to help in that endeavor by setting the output coordinates within the geoprocessing environments. Prior to changing each of our data layers to the proper space, we're going to add a new pre-mapping activity to our ever-changing and growing list. You will set the output coordinates so that almost any tool that you use, including project, will utilize the proper coordinate system in the process, thus saving you multiple checks and drop-down selections throughout your quizzes and labs. We must first ask a question. Do any of our current data layers, shapefile, feature classes, etc. currently have, prior to changing their spatial reference, of course, we have not changed them, the desired spatial reference? And there's the question. Do any of our data layers currently have the desired spatial preference? Yes or no? If no, select none for the next question. If yes, check all that apply from the list that is given to you in the question. So we're talking about the list of all of this data. Which did we just determine had our desired NAD 1983 UTM Zone 10N? Once you've determined that, the next step is back in Environmental Settings, Output Coordinates. I go to Geoprocessing, Environments. Notice that the workspace is still set to my K4, but I go to Output Coordinates. I do not want to use same as input. There are two ways that we can go about this. If one of our layers that you designated in the last two questions has the correct projected coordinate system, we could choose as specified below. In this case, because no layers are added to our map, there is no option to use a certain layer, so we must choose the hand holding the mini piece of paper, go to Projected, UTM, NAD 1983, and NAD 1983 UTM Zone 10N. From there, I click OK. Based on the information determined above, the data that did not need their spatial reference changed may simply be added to the data folder. Let's pause there for a moment. According to my notes, the data that did not need their spatial properties changed were toxic waste to start with. So I'll drag toxic waste to my data. Urban Gardens X. I'll drag Urban Gardens X to my data. Urban Gardens Z. Block groups. And neighborhoods. In addition, the DBF file does not need its properties altered because there are no spatial properties. I'll drag that up as well. So I have 4 layers left, or 4 pieces of data that must have their spatial reference fixed. For the layers or data that must have their spatial properties altered, those will be fixed so that they properly align with the other data within projected coordinate system NAD 1983 UTM Zone 10N, and then added to the data folder. Moving through the data in the order in which they were presented to us, let's start with Washington counties. Washington counties must be projected to the proper coordinate system. I open my toolbox. Notice it says not responding. I'll just wait. Data management tools, projections and transformations, project. My input feature class is coming from the raw data, Washington counties. It tells me what I already have in my notes for the input coordinate system. And automatically, because we set the output coordinates, automatically the output coordinates pop up into this box. It also looks like it's sending it to my data K4, Washington Counties Project. That's a decent name, so I'm going to keep it. If this gets too long and you must scroll, place your mouse in the box and scroll with your mouse using the arrows. For now, this looks perfect. I'm going to click OK. A new layer is added to my map, and the data is added to my data folder. From there, I would clear the projection of my data frame once I close this box. Clear, apply, OK. And the data should not move. The next piece of data in our list as they were presented to us was Urban Gardens Y that needs to have the spatial properties resolved. I'll again go back to the project tool because there are some spatial properties, and I'll choose Urban Gardens Y. Click Add. The projected coordinate system that it currently has, Harn, State Plane, Washington South, matches my notes. The new name will be Urban Garden Y Project. That's a good enough name. I could also shorten that if I'd like. The output coordinate system is already set for us, and a geographic transformation is already added. So that makes it helpful for us. I click OK. The new Urban Gardens Y project is added to the data frame. I close the processing window and notice that Urban Gardens Y project has been added to my data folder. I'll clear the projection of my data frame, and the data remains because they are in the same coordinate system. The next piece of data was Neighborhoods 2. That also has some spatial properties. Thus, it only needs a project, not a defined projection. I'll choose Neighborhoods 2. It tells me what my notes tell me. I will shorten this to PROJ. I'm keeping the dot shape because that helps it automatically be added to my table of contents. The correct coordinate system is placed in here for me. Notice I'm double checking to make sure it's going to my data of Quiz 4 within my user ID of Quiz 4, etc. You must always check this prior to moving on and just saving it in a random folder. Click OK. Close the dialog box because there are no warnings. It's added to my data frame in my table of contents. Clear. Apply. It's still there. Neighborhoods 2. It's hard to see, so I'm going to zoom to it. And there it is. So I make sure it's there. And notice Neighborhoods 2 PROJ is in my data folder. The last piece of data to change that needs its spatial properties changed is places. As a reminder, places was unknown. Therefore, because there are no spatial properties for places, I must define the projection first. I define the projection, choose places, and this is where we have to be very cautious. We have entered this as our output coordinate system. But if you remember from Lab 3, we do not define projection to this projected coordinate system. We must go back and choose for any data I give you, by the way, that does not have any spatial reference. It is census data. We know that, and we know it because we know it's census data. We must go to the native coordinate system, and that is Geographic Coordinate System, North America, USA and Territories, NAD 1983. That is where we have to send the data. We click OK. It changes for us, and we click OK. I close, and notice places has been added to the map. It has also been added to the raw data. Or excuse me, it's showing that it's coming from the raw data. No new file was created. It's still right here in my data, raw data K4. If I now look at the properties, you can't see it, it's below the screen, but if I look at the properties, now there is a spatial reference for this data, geographic coordinate system. There's a datum, which means I'm now ready to just project. I'll click OK. I'm going to clear the projection of my coordinates of my data frame because we should always clear. Apply. OK. And now I'm going to zoom to one of the layers. Notice that places is nowhere to be found. If I zoom to layer, it's not there. It's out on its own. It is nowhere near these two items. I can turn it on and off and notice it doesn't show up anywhere. I could even go by list by drawing order, and places is above Washington counties, so it should show up, but it's not because it has a different spatial reference. It is now time to project. because places is in my table of contents, I can choose it in the drop down. It tells me what I just put in when I defined the projection. Places project is a perfect name. It's going to now to the data K4 of my user ID, quiz 4, quizzes, and my directory. And as we started before, the NAD 1983 UTM Zone 10N is the projected coordinate system that it's supposed to go into. I'll click OK. Close. Places project shows up on the map. I may now remove places, and I have the 4 that were originally in the map. Clear, or the 4 that we fixed. We don't need places because it's only been defined. Places project is the one we want. Clear the coordinate system of my data frame, and then zoom to a layer. Notice I'm not freaking out about this sole dot in the middle of the screen. I zoom to layer, and now I can turn on and off Urban Gardens Y, Places Project. Neighborhoods 2 isn't showing up, but if I zoom to it, I can see it. It's behind there somewhere. Places is above it. So perhaps I should put Neighborhoods 2 above Places. And then Washington is in the back or the bottom as we're drawing. At this point, I could add the rest of the data, or since we don't know exactly what's coming up in the next step, I will just save my map by File, Save As, make sure it's going to my Maps folder of my user ID in Quiz 4 Quizzes directory of my storage device. And instead of step 1, I'll change it to step 2 and click Save. That becomes the active map. Notice I have all of my required data in my data folder, and I have my step 2 map. This concludes step 2 of GIS 311 Quiz 4 video demo.